communities. And we've found that more and more local officials are having to ask themselves, how is it they need to have and continue to support a vibrant economy, and they see high quality childcare and early learning as such a central part of that. So I think this will be a great conversation today. So I'll share with you our panel. Charmaine Webster, who's the Director of Community Engagement and Outreach with Dayton, Montgomery County Preschool Promise, is joining us. And also from the Dayton area is Palmer Jason, who's a fantastic provider. He's the Director of Strategic Initiatives, he's the co-owner and the director of Good Shepherd Academy in Dayton. So he wears two hats, both as a business owner, but also as a director of the services. So we'll be excited to hear about what's happening in that region of the state. And then we're gonna head up to the Northeastern Ohio region of the state, where we're gonna hear from Laura DiCola, she's the Director of Strategic Initiatives and Policy at the Summit Education Initiative. As well as Ronette Moss, who is with the Family Enrichment Center. She directs that center at the YMCA of Greater Akron. And then we'll hear from two mayors from both of those, who represent both of those regions. Mayor Nan Whaley, who serves the city of Dayton and has been serving since 2005, but as its mayor since 2013. She's a really dedicated public servant who focuses a lot of her efforts on championing redevelopment of the city of Dayton and ensuring opportunity for everyone in her community. She's also been a founding board member of the bipartisan Ohio Mayors Alliance. So these are issues that she's been talking about for a long time, not just in Dayton, but certainly with her colleagues around the state. And has national recognition and engagement, as she's the second vice president for the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And so she's able to bring some of the learnings from her work in Dayton and in the region to the national stage, which is really exciting. And then we'll also hear from Mayor Dan Horgan, who is in his second term as the mayor of Akron. And so he's no stranger to SEI and some of the other supporting organizations, and has been focusing a lot of his work as mayor on the, certainly the core services in the city, but really trying to cultivate an opportunity for all. He's been especially committed to equity, and we've seen this, witnessed this as someone who's been hosting these equity summits to really focus on maternal and child health and reduce the unnecessary and immoral infant deaths that are happening in our community. So we're excited to have both of them and to hear a little bit about what they've been doing in the early childhood space and how they've been thinking about these issues, and what kinds of suggestions they would give to other mayors or county commissioners or local policymakers as they think about this. So with that set up, I'm going to stop talking, and Charmaine, if I could, I'm going to turn it over to you to give us a couple of minutes on the work of Preschool Promise and how that relates to your local community.
Hi, so as Shannon said, my name is Charmaine Webster, and I'm the Director of Community Engagement for Preschool Promise, which is located in Montgomery County, Ohio, in the city center, urban center is Dayton, Ohio. And so we have been an initiative for over 6 years now, working to really find a way to bring high quality preschool to children throughout Montgomery County. And part of the reason why this initiative started was that we noticed that our children, most of them were not showing up fully ready for kindergarten. And we saw that correlated with people not acts, not showing up and graduating from high school and then matriculating into some sort of second degree, higher education or career credential. And so as a result, we said, we know that one of the ways to give our children a strong start is for them to have a high quality preschool experience. And so we started that initiative. And it has been a lot of work, because when you are working in early childhood, you're dealing with multiple systems. You're dealing with the Ohio Department of Education. You're also dealing with the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services. And the reason why we're working with all of those entities is because if we want to reach all of our children, if we want to have an impact with all of our kids, then we have to work with all of these different entities that cross and touch families' lives during those early years. And so some of the things that we've been able to do is provide professional development to our child care providers, provide tuition assistance for our families that need access to it. And then we have a unique program where we focused on also being able to give attended support to our families, because we know that if children are getting a high quality classroom, but they're not showing up, then it's not going to have the impact that we desire to see. And so there's a lot of challenges, because there's inequities between childcare and school-based preschool, but then there's inequities just within preschool and school-age children, right? Our teachers are paid less. There's fewer benefits. There's longer work hours. There's just a whole lot of challenges. And many of our childcare workers find themselves also needing the same supports that the families that they serve also need. And so we've really looked at building a coalition across the different types of providers, but providing that extra support so that our providers could get star rated, be able to provide their teachers with some additional support, and be able to close these gaps. But there's just so much work to do to break down the inequities. And so when the pandemic started, all of the inequities that existed before, just like in the rest of the industries, we saw that same thing here with childcare. But I would say the benefit of having had this initiative, which has been supporting families, children, and childcare providers and educators for several years, is that we were able to provide some leadership at a state level to make sure that our childcare voices were heard, and that some of the policies that have come forth and some of the programming and funding is a result of the leadership that was here in Dayton, Ohio. And so when we look at our centers being star rated and still reaching those goals, even in the midst of a pandemic, in Montgomery County, depending on the provider type, we are above 90% at all levels. We have been able to organize work groups so that providers could come together and work together and problem solve some of the issues. And we've been able to elevate provider voices to our state legislators, because so often they get lost, right? But we've been able to help bring those voices to our state leaders so that they know what the issues are. And so it really does make a difference to have a local initiative around early childhood in your community, because what I've learned is that for so many years, parents of young children and providers have given over their voice, have given over their power to everybody else, just waiting for everyone else to help them. And when you have a local initiative that makes early childhood makes early childhood a priority, then you start to empower these people who for years have felt like they had no support, to know that they're valued, to know that they matter, and to know that they can work together, that we don't have to have a spirit of competition, but that we can have a spirit of cooperation so that our community can be strong, our families can be strong, and our children can be strong.
That is such a great summary of kinds of the services and supports that you provide when we look at early childhood through a systems lens. And that's really what Preschool Promise is doing, is they're not looking at it only from a single provider. They're looking at all of the providers. They're looking at the parents and the families. They're looking at it from the teachers who are in the classrooms. It allows you all to be able to share those perspectives to elevate learnings that individual providers and teachers have with one another, because they aren't alone. It's a really dynamic organization that you're helping to lead, Charmaine. And I think that that leads us so nicely to Palmer as one of the components of the preschool promise, and can really, would you share with us, Palmer, some of your experiences as a provider, but also I think it's worth, you know, exploring some of the challenges that the pandemic has brought. And then the last thing I would add is how families are coping in this time with all of those things.
Awesome. Thank you, Charmaine. I thought you were just going to do a base hit. Now you hit a home run. I got to get up here and not strike out. Good morning. My name is Palmer Jason. I am the director and co-owner of Good Shepherd Academy here in Dayton, Ohio. We're a faith-based center that serves both private pay and publicly funded children in the South Dayton, Montgomery County area. I just wanted to share that Preschool Promise and 4C for Children have just been a godsend for us in terms of helping us as we are developing our programs, and especially when we got into this pandemic. Our industry was struggling pre-COVID-19, and it is especially showing stress fractures now that we are in to a whole new normal. And you know, if we don't address some of these stress factors, it's going to result in the collapse of the availability of quality childcare for many families in Ohio and also across our nation. We, like thousands of other owners and operators, are passionate about the work that we get to do every day as we work with children and work with their families. But it's especially challenging for independent centers and family-based childcare providers, because we have a dual responsibility, a dual role. We are not only working in our business, but we're also required to work on our business. And that's where having outside support really helps. When you're the only administrator and you've got to read all these emails and you've got to keep up with all this fast pace and changing regulations, it really helps to have a infrastructure and a support system out there that is on calls like this, that is sending out summaries and that's helping us with the highlights. Some of the challenges that we face are, Charmaine mentioned some of them, but we have a maturing workforce. We have people who love children and they've been doing it for years. And having new people come into the industry is difficult when we don't get to the point where we have a living wage. Even though you're excited about children, we love to work with them, but we can't work with them for free because our kids have to eat too, right? So we have a maturing workforce. We have the public's desire for quality versus their willingness and their ability to be able to afford it. We have to negotiate the balance between having regulation that ensures health and safety and quality versus having too much regulation or too much administration that makes us spend so much time working on that and not being able to spend time in the classroom with children. We also have just the community's lack of understanding and the valuing of what we do for so many with so little. And so elevating that voice so that they know if we don't have childcare, then we don't have a recovery. We are essential workers. And it takes all of us getting involved and all of us advocating to help. So without us working as a team, it's going to really be difficult. I always think that childcare is kind of a misnomer, because while we are caring for the child, we really are caring for the family. When you care for families, you care for your community. When you care for your community, then we're caring for our nation. And then once we're caring for the nation, we're caring for the world. So I tell people, if you want to change the world, you're going to have to change childcare and preschool, right? And to have that quality preschool experience available. I'm convinced that the school to prison pipeline will not be arrested with after school programs and detention centers, but rather with quality childcare and a quality preschool experience. Kids are experiencing trauma, and we are often the first responders who provide the triage and the therapy that they need in order to be healed. We got to start early, addressing the whole child. And our motto here at Good Shepherd Academy is developing minds, active bodies, and peaceful souls. So thank you all for listening. I'm happy to share later as questions come up.
Palmer, there are so many great nuggets of wisdom that you imparted on us. And I think, thinking about the idea that without childcare, our economy can't recover is, certainly the types of issues that our local policymakers are thinking about every day. And I'm wondering, Laura, if we move up into a different part of the state that has been approaching this work, can you talk to us a little bit about what SEI is doing from a systems building standpoint? But I'm curious too to know if your approach has been different from, say, preschool promises and how you're thinking about building up a system that supports the providers.
Great, thank you, everybody. I'm Laura DiCola. I'm with Summit Education Initiative in Akron, Ohio. And it's always a tough act to follow our colleagues from Dayton, and this is no exception. Very, very wonderful. Really both Charmaine and Palmer touched on, this essential idea that COVID has really exposed both the weaknesses and the deep cracks that already existed in our system, but also at the same time is highlighting that bedrock role that childcare and early learning plays to both our community and economic infrastructure. So it's undeniable that safe, affordable, reliable, accessible, quality childcare is really essential not only to this economic restart, but to our continuing and ongoing communities as a whole. It's not a nice to have, which sometimes I think that's what people think. It's a nice to have. Families need it to work. Employers count on it for a stable and productive workforce, and certainly our children need it to grow and to thrive. So for that reason, the biggest sort of community-wide challenges we've been working on to address both pre and post-COVID rely on this or focus on the precarious nature of the childcare industry, where our programs are already operating on razor-thin margins, and staff many times earn, poverty level wages or wages less than what you can earn as an Uber driver. So you'll be hearing more on these specific challenges in addition to what Palmer shared from Ronette in a few minutes. But I want to share that in Summit County, our capacity has been reduced to about half of what it typically is. And we thought many programs would be reopening in the fall, but there's still grave uncertainty and even more uncertainty now around that. And it's really just exacerbating a big problem that we already had and we were looking at in some of our communities and neighborhoods. They're childcare deserts. There's no early learning, anything accessible, any licensed and quality providers. And so we had been working systemically to address that before COVID hit, in identifying the need to increase and make more seats and more options accessible. And now we're scrambling to protect and preserve what's already there based on these things. We need to our centers remain open and affordable, and accessible to our families. So what we're doing to address that is in some ways similar and in other ways different from Dayton. I'll share at the outset, our employers have voiced concern about what childcare options are available to the employees as they return, particularly in light of uncertainties with the K-12 system and what that looks like. So there's a whole, infrastructure around trying to address that. But really more importantly, it dovetails what Charmaine and Palmer have shared is the impact on our children and communities, and this idea that childcare is not just a safe place for kids to go to enable families to work, but it's really the place where children learn and children grow. And we know that what happens in those very early years hardwires the brain in a way that sets the foundation for all early learning. And so what SEI has done in partnership with our local community and our local partners is to align around the data that shows kids who start kindergarten on track for success are twice as likely than their peers to be hitting third grade reading levels on time. And we know third grade's this pivotal point in a child's educational journey that predicts school success all the way through and success in life. So, everybody recognizes the need to make sure kids are reading at grade level. How do you do that? The most effective strategy is to get them ready for kindergarten before they even hit that K-12 system. That's where it happens in what I like to call the wild, wild west of early childhood, because it's a patchwork system. So we've been working on, first of all, recognizing the importance of those early years to a child's academic trajectory, and then unifying all of the partners in our community in the spaces where we find them, not just the childcare sector, but our health sector, our mental health sector, all of our folks, our parents and families, in bringing folks together around elevating those important early years. So that piece has been key. And then finally, the other large bucket, and both Palmer and Charmaine touched on this, is our current approach really fails to recognize that our educators and childcare workforce are themselves essential workers who need these resources. They face dilemmas because they themselves are in high risk categories for that, and they face dilemmas in risking their own health or their family's health in the need to stay open for their financial security or for their communities. So what we've done locally as a community that I'm really proud of is our local community has really addressed some of the gaps that we're seeing in the system. With one program that's been led by one of our local funders, GAR Foundation, in partnership with the Early Childhood Resource Center. They've partnered together to deliver a really comprehensive series of data-driven coaching supports, comprehensive technical assistance, materials, curriculum, to a cohort of 23 Akron-based preschool centers to just show what deep investment in providing resources and infrastructure to build quality and sustaining quality can mean to our sector and to our children, which has been great. And we've also been shifting here along under the leadership of the Early Childhood Resource Center, to providing business models and business and financial supports to our centers who really need that to help support the system. And then our city, in partnership with another key community pillar, the United Way of Summit County, has provided support to our early childhood workforce, particularly our actual stipends and salary support to teachers at the YMCA, which is our largest provider, working with our Akron Public Schools and Mayor Horgan and the city around wraparound services and family resources centers, recognizing these systems don't work in isolation. We need to bring them together. And then just at the end of the day, we have leadership in our community, our elected officials, our thought leaders, our philanthropic support, our businesses, but many folks who really recognize the importance of high quality early learning, healthy development, starting not just preschool, not just childcare, but the efforts that the mayor's office is leading around infant mortality, how this all goes into providing a system and a structure that gives our families the supports that they need so that, that we can grow and thrive as a community and that our kids can start school healthy, happy, ready to learn, and ready to hit the ground running.
Yeah, I mean, I love what you said about it's been this patchwork, I think is the phrase. It's like, you know, we didn't really have a system. We had a patchwork of maybe inadequate funding streams that were trying to meet needs. And what I'm hearing you say is SEI has really been the leadership in the community to bring all of these partners together to say, how can we, you know, elevate this patchwork into an actual system that works with one another, that seamlessly provides the supports for the economy, the supports for the families, but as important, the supports for these children who are at a really vulnerable time and opportunity, really, of rapid brain development, to be able to be successful, to set them on that path to be successful in school and career and beyond. So Ronette, I'm wondering that now, hearing kind of the partnerships that are happening in your community, as the largest provider that Laura shared in your community, what does all of this mean for you and the program that you're directing?
It's very important, you know, to us here at the YMCA daycare facilities. It takes a lot, you know, to work with children, and without the help and, you know, the needs that we need for our program, our children wouldn't be able to succeed. I think a lot of people forget, you know, what childcare is about. They think that, you know, childcare is we're just dropping our kid off and then we're going to come pick up. But it's so much more than that. You know, there's learning involved. And I think that, you know, a lot of people don't realize that we are the bridge to get this child to kindergarten. We are the starting line. We're the ones that's in the front that's preparing this child to have the knowledge to go to kindergarten and know things that he or she should know by the time he's moving on to that next level. And it's not just about learning, it's also about that social emotional. You know, are they going to be able to, you know, to handle friendships and how to talk to, you know, and express feelings, and just basically to have that camaraderie with their co-friends that they're going to have in kindergarten. But it's also about families and parents being involved. Parents play a big role in their child's life as far as education. We have parents that need to be that spokesperson also, to stick up for their child in childcare and say, hey, I've been a volunteer here. We have families that actually come, you know, before the pandemic help, that would come in and help out in a classroom with a party, or in a classroom just to come read their children or their friends a story. So it involves all of us as a team to get childcare to where it needs to be. I know right now we're having a hard time over here with the ratios that were just met. You know, we need expanded ratios because there were some kids that, you know, that really needed to be here, you know, to get to that next level, to help them get to that next level for kindergarten, just to be here, to be with their friends. You know, I wasn't able to bring everybody back, and that's, you know, a big concern, you know, that I have here, that we weren't able to bring, you know, the children that we used to serve back to our facility so that they can still be in our program and getting the necessity needs that they need to have here at the YMCA centers.
Yeah, you really touched on an area, or several areas that I am really passionate about, and that is the role that parents play in this. And sometimes talk about childcare as if the parents are external to this. Because the parents have to work, then we have to have this. And I have never been more moved than talking with and hearing the stories of parents who share how they view the child care providers that they entrust their children with. That they view them not as a substitute parent, but as a partner with them in their child's healthy social, emotional, and academic development. And so I appreciate you elevating them as a real partner in this work, because after all, they are the first and best teachers of their children, and they look to the teachers that are in your programs as partners. So thank you for that. I'm really eager now to get both Mayor Whaley and Mayor Horgan into this conversation, because what we know is that without the political leadership and vision of our elected leaders, SEI and Preschool Promise and all of their partners wouldn't have the success that they have right now. And while there are plenty of warning signs and concerns that we have in this COVID environment, where we really have to redouble our efforts, we know that in of the 25 plus years I've been involved in public policy, this is the most complicated and challenging issue, and yet it's the most proven way to resolve many of our challenges that are facing our communities. So I want to get you both in there, and I'll start with you, Mayor Whaley, and if you could share with us sort of, you know, why you came about the engagement and the support of this new preschool promise, what it has meant to your community, and maybe if you have some suggestions for some of the other policymakers that are on the call. I know that I've been told that there's a couple of your colleagues who are on the call. Mayor Scheffler from Lancaster, I know, is on the call. Representative Golonsky and Senator Fetter, Commissioner Rice, Mayor, is on the call. So you might have some thoughts for them too, and how they can be thinking about this issue.
Well, Shannon, thank you for having us, and thanks for Groundwork's tremendous leadership in this work. I always love getting to hear from Charmaine on the great work that Preschool Promise is doing in Dayton and Montgomery County. I think it's a reason why Dayton got so engaged in Preschool Promise was really the collective impact model that the work that had already been done in the city and in the county around the continuum of education from the cradle to adulthood and beyond, and this idea that we're lifelong learners, and the real need for 0 to 5, obviously preschool 3 and 4 year olds, but then those first 1,000 days, and how much we can make an impact and a difference. And quite frankly, that impact is not as expensive as other places in the continuum. And so, although I'm going to get to cost in a minute, because I have a couple of things to say about it. And I think when we decided on City of Learners and doing this work across the city, it just became really obvious that we needed to put our money where our mouth was around making sure our kids in Dayton were ready for kindergarten. And so I was really proud to lead the effort in 2016. It's really one of just a handful of things that I am most proud of as mayor of Dayton, that the people of the city said, yes, we want to invest in our youngest people, and agreed to a 0.25% income tax that won by double-digit margins around this vision of investing in ourselves. Now, I was hopeful that the local community would invest and we would find partners in the state and federal government to help leverage that dollar so we could use the local money to get more funding to really help fund 3-year-olds and help that first 1,000 days. And sadly, these past 4 years, we just haven't seen that commitment. If anything, we are fighting to keep the funding alive at the State House. We're fighting to keep that funding federally. And then you hear the stories of the child care providers, the ones that are working for a wage that is less than what the Youth Works program is for Montgomery County. Like, let's think about that. That's where we're putting our investment in when we claim this is so important. And you hear when I'm on calls, for example, during COVID, from the child care providers that are providers and people of color, and the challenges that they have that are more unequal over and over. And it gets very, very frustrating. And I think we are at a precipice here in COVID time where our country and our state need to decide if they truly value education and they value children 5 and under. And it is really easy to show if you value it or if you don't. And I have been disappointed over and over about the lack of value they've been showing. And that now we're at this point where you have people like Palmer and you have the great providers, and they're not going to make it. This is very simple. You know, child care, which is the basis of our workforce, the basis of how moms can get to work. Now we're asking, and it's mostly on moms, no offense to the guys, you know, Danny, I'm not trying to be hard on you, you know, moms figure it out. And what we're asking women to do right now during COVID to figure out their family, to figure out their work is unattainable, and it cannot continue on. And I am begging particularly women to stop just figuring it out, but to say enough, and that we have got to have real funding that provides for the child care providers, provides a real wage for these teachers, and provides opportunities that we can only go so far locally. And that's what I think is so important. And that's why the work that Groundwork is doing is important. And that's why these calls are important, because people need to rise up and say we must have real legitimate funding for childcare if our children really mean something. So I'm sorry to get off my soapbox.
No, please.
Down. And I'm really excited to be here with Mayor Horrigan. Akron and Dayton are almost like Ohio sister cities. You know, we look at each other all the time and steal. I steal from Danny. That's the biggest compliment that I can give for Mayor Horrigan. And Shannon, just so grateful that you're taking the time to put this together and to fight for real funding for our youngest people that don't have voices.
Well, I could not have said it any better. Indeed, we know what our priorities are if we look at what we're funding. And so if we say this is the priority, then we have to put our money where our mouth is. And we can't expect local communities to do it alone. It's going to take a strong state and a strong federal partner to do that. So thank you for lifting that up. Mayor Horrigan, back to follow, but in your own right, you've done so much in your community, where Akron is not as far along, started later than the city of Dayton did, but what can you tell us about your engagement there and how you've been viewing this issue through your daily work?
Well, first of all, thank you, Shannon and Groundworks Ohio, for having us on. You're right, it is a tough act to follow. I have to do it pretty much on a weekly basis. But, you know, in listening to all of you about the thought leadership around this, it's, you know, it's really one of the easiest conversations that I've had when it comes to this. Laura explained a little bit about the 4 bold goals around the United Way, and one of them was third grade reading level, and kids not reading at a 3rd grade level. And to me, it kind of exacerbated the issue about that being a bold goal. So let's philanthropically kind of say, okay, let's put some money towards this. And what it really did, and I hope Laura would agree, that it just exacerbated the issue that we don't have enough money to put towards it. And so, quite frankly, Akron was very close, even pre-COVID, to say, okay, universal pre-K is important, all of these things, how do we go out and maybe ask the community for the same thing? And so, not that that is off the table at any particular stretch, I think we want to work through a couple of things, but in listening to all of this, and Palmer mentioned a couple of things, one of the key words he mentioned as an entire explanation was the word care. You know, when you walk into a restaurant, they don't say, what do you want? They say, how can you help you? How can we help you? And I think that's the role that we have to play. And getting behind this, like I said, has probably been one of the easier things to do. It really is trying to, I think, forge some of those partnerships to say, because as Nan had mentioned, we have to literally fight at every level to say, and we shouldn't have to, and we have systems in place to almost everything, you know, with public education, with government services. We don't, in listening to this, we have a patchwork system for kids. I mean, that's reprehensible that we do that way as a society, that we have to do a patchwork system. And I think sometimes the conversation has gotten hijacked to say that childcare is babysitting. Trust me, I babysat before. That's not childcare. And I think people think, well, they're just babysitters. They're not. They're the key linchpin. They're the key in moving you from one level to the next. And if we don't come up with some sort of issue, I'm proud to be behind it. Like I said, I think, you know, Nan and I steal ideas from each other. I steal more from her than she steals from me. And this was a key one to move the community forward in and around all of the things that we've done, and especially around economic development. Two of the things that we found were childcare and transportation and single moms getting to work. We're going to figure that out, and we're going to put resources behind that so people can go to work. That is how people, if you want to open the economy, then people have to go to work. Then you have to be able to provide some sort of service for their kids and for their children. And it's not babysitting, it is childcare. And I think that is the critical role for us to be able to do in the ensuing years. So I'm very proud to be part of the conversation. I think with a cohort of mayors, you know, across the state of Ohio. Palmer asked me an interesting question about the other day in our pre-call when he just said, you know, when was your conversion? And I said, it really wasn't a conversion because I taught high school for 10 years. So I can appreciate the value of education, but it was mostly high school kids and seniors. But, you know, you still had to adjust your schedule and your type to how a kid would learn. Imagine doing that with X number of children at 3 years old or 4 years old. That is an art and a skill that is developed over time. If we don't put resources towards that, and one of the speakers that I did hear that the city was able to bring in, or SEI was able to bring in, and if anybody on here wants to look up who I think is probably the leader in the country in this, is Jeffrey Canada. And look what he's done up in New York City around that. And to me, that was, like I said, we're an avowed thief of good ideas. And that wasn't just a good idea, it was a great idea. And Nan and I like to say we like to make data-driven decisions. Guess what? It's all there. All that data is there for us to be able to follow, and we can prove it. And so to me, I think it's an easy thing to get behind. And I'm proud to work with all of you and the panelists on here and the participants. We need to be able to move this state forward, you know, with whether it's childcare or a universal pre-K. Those should be basics that we start with. So thank you.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. And I know Laura shared when we talked how excited she was that you really responded to Jeffrey Canada, because that was a really big get to get someone of that profile into the community. So it's good to hear that he had an impact on you. I'm you know, as I've been listening to the panel and reflecting on the feedback, there's no doubt that those of us in the field and have been active in this work have really, we're really passionate about the families that are served and the children, that brain building that Laura talked about, you know, why it's important to building up our workforce of the future, why making our youngest and most vulnerable infants and toddlers have more nurturing and enriching experiences, and how that relates to their success. And Mayor Horgan talked about how we have all sorts of data that shows that indeed is the case. I think what COVID-19 has really thrust upon communities, and I'm going to go to Mayor Whaley first, and then back to Mayor Horrigan. But we end up talking a lot in the field about the workforce of tomorrow. I'm wondering how COVID-19 has impacted your community discussions, business leaders, about the workforce of today. Because historically, you didn't hear a lot of business voices lifting up the need for high quality childcare, particularly for infants and toddlers and our youngest and most vulnerable children. So how has COVID-19 changed the dialogue? What is the opportunity to bring new partners to this discussion that we can use to elevate this voice to the state and federal level of how, if this is a priority, we need to fund the priority?
Right, I think you're right, Shannon. I think the opportunity is definitely there. We've seen a lot of discussion about this childcare issue, not necessarily for the workers of tomorrow, but for the workers of today, right? And so when you see the workforce that is almost equal women to men now, and women are still doing the majority of the childcare providing at home, and when and even, I mean, and great men are helping in this. I'm not trying to be disparaging, but really the decision, what I've noticed with workers at the city of Dayton and workers across our community, is the stress of that decision in a two-family household really falls on the woman. And what I notice is it's coming back into the business community because it's coming through their door on their own workforce. And so they're recognizing, particularly during this time of COVID, oh, like, I'm not going to get the quality worker that I really need because the childcare decision is so difficult, is so hard because of, you know, the rules, the number of childcare providers that have been cut. Like, I've got to get involved in this. I think the other thing that is changing is we're seeing more women leaders running businesses, and this is a big issue for women. And, you know, some enlightened men like Mayor Horgan. So, you know, what I think that's a big, okay, Palmer, you too. Okay. So I think that's a big opportunity. What is frustrating to me is I think it is so obvious what needs to happen, and it's not happening. So, you know, we really need those business voices to make this a priority as we're talking about stimulus dollars, as we're talking about ways to really, I think if we were able to be successful federally with federal stimulus dollars for childcare, to reimagine, you know, pay scale on places of childcare, what childcare really looks like overall, the vision that you all have been talking about for years. COVID could be the opportunity to get that happen, but you can't do that without funding. And you certainly can't do it when you have state senators thinking about making cuts to this program, right? So that is like a definite non-starter in the state house, but then the opportunity, I think, is really in the federal side on childcare and how we can really get legitimate dollars into these programs. And it has to be more sustainable too, right? We have to have a program that really works in the 0 to 5 arena, that isn't just grant money. I mean, the philanthropy movement has been amazing through this, but you just can't keep on keeping on that way. This has got to be something that our country, our state says, hey, this is really valuable, and we're in it to really create this workforce we really need. As we think about K through 12, particularly during COVID, you know, it's even more exasperating because, you know, these school districts are making very tough, difficult decisions. You know, in general, when we're talking about children right now, I just ask everyone to give everybody some grace during this time because, you know, I think everybody's trying to do their very best, and school leaders are trying to do their best, and superintendents and child care providers, and it is really, really hard as we get into the 5th month. I think what's most difficult about COVID right now is people think that the beginning that was hard. I think the second half of this may be harder because it's just becoming so constant in our lives and so like just rubbing on our humanity in a way that's very difficult. So I just remind everyone to give everybody some grace and space as we try to figure this out for our communities too.
Great advice. Mayor Horgan, how about you? Are you hearing from business leaders in Akron that have had an aha moment as they're trying to bring their employees back to work and to build up their workforce of today?
Yeah, if anything, you know, that conversation probably started maybe even a little bit pre-COVID is, you know, how do we develop a workforce and give people different options around, you know, how do they perform the best work? Obviously, you want a worker to be able to come, but they got to feel comfortable that their kids are going somewhere and they're going to receive instruction and they're going to be in school. If I've heard anything, it's been from parents who really have pushed. I think there's a groundswell out there that parents realize that they are not built to be a parent and a teacher at the same time for 8 hours a day. And they like that physical space a little bit to say, okay, I'm with a trusted provider. I can go to work. I don't have to worry about that. I think that has changed the mentality way to say, you know what, this is the most important thing for my children to be able to do this. And if I'm still going to be able to go to work, and I think they put pressure on employers, both large and small, that we need some sort of option, and you guys have to figure it out as a community. I think Nan's right. It has opened up that conversation that we have not been able to have, I think, generationally, to say, what's the most important? If you want a happy employee that's able to go to work, you better make darn sure that they feel comfortable that their kids are going somewhere and that they get that instruction and all of those things that childcare and early in universal pre-K would do. So I think there's more of an opportunity now to have that conversation and hopefully have some more positive results across the state. But like Nan said, we have to continue to fight daily. But this to me is worth the fight on a daily basis.
That's really helpful feedback. And I know we just have a couple of minutes left here. We could talk for another hour or so. But I want to give everyone one sentence here to close out. What is one piece of advice that you'd like to give to the over 200 people who are listening to this call on what they could do today to support our early childhood system in their own community? And so if you could think about speaking for your peers, I'll start to give everybody a chance to think about this. But one thing that everybody listening can do today, they can get on our Voter Voice platform, and I'll have someone way more tech savvy than I from Groundwork put into the chat box, and maybe we can send a follow-up email out if for those who are registered here on the call. Oh, it's in there. See, they're right on top of it. If you would go onto that link, this is a really important period of time where we have to communicate to our federal policymakers, our members of the United States Senate and the U.S. House of Representatives, that before they go on their August recess, that we need desperately for emergency funding for childcare so we can continue to pay our providers, we can continue to invest in quality, and that we have the capacity, especially for our infants and toddlers, as parents are trying to go back to work. So we need you to, it's so easy. It will take you 15 seconds to send a message. And to send a tweet and use social media to do that. So that is my one thing that you can do right now or today that would really make a difference. With that, Charmaine, I'm going to turn it to you. One thing.
Okay, I'm going to cheat and say two. But the first thing is, and this is coming from my heart, to encourage parents to call the news and make this a real issue. We see that leaders move when parents bring the news in and tear it up. So this is the uncut Charmaine. I'm encouraging you all to encourage parents to tear it up for their children, for childcare, and call the news so we can see these leaders move. And then I'm going to say, trust them when they speak. Okay, there we go. That's my.
Both are great points, Charmaine. Palmer.
Ditto, ditto, ditto.
Yeah.
Send more than one email. Just keep sending them. All they're doing is counting. Send it 3 times. Send it from every email address you have. You'll get back the same form letter, but that's not what's important. What's important is they know we're talking about it, because all of them aren't on this Zoom call. Love you guys.
Thank you, Palmer. I love that. Laura, one thing.
I'm not that imaginative. I was going to say the same. Raise our voices, elevate the issue, raise. Talk about it, and talk about it, because now is our opportunity, and it takes a village. I spoke about the investments in our local community, and Mayor Whaley, Mayor Horgan spoke eloquently. It's federal support, it's state support, it's individual support, it's local support, it's all of us to really, really build a change system that can support our families. So vote with your voice.
Well said. Ronette, one thing.
Be involved. I think a lot of families feel like they don't have that voice to say anything about childcare. But be involved with your children, be involved in saying, hey, our childcare facility needs things. We need opportunities for our children to succeed. Just to be that shining light for your child that is an infant that can't talk yet, you're speaking for them. Be involved and go out and make changes and make the phone calls and whatever you need to do to fight this fight that we have for our children here to be able to succeed to that next level in their life.
Thank you, Ronette. That was really, Palmer, you know, one thing, of course,
can I just say to the child care providers that are on the line, you guys know our parents will do anything we ask them to do. So print out the link, and when they come to pick up their kids with their phone, when they're scanning them out, tell them, here, push this button and send this to your representative. We can get, because if we got 200 on the call today, we can get 2,000 letters in by the end of the day.
Love that. Thank you. Now, to your colleagues that are listening either live or might listen to this webcast that we will have available in a couple of hours on our website, I'll start with you, Mayor Whaley. What is the one thing that you wish your mayors or hope that your mayors around Ohio can do to support childcare?
Well, I've been really impressed with the mayors of Ohio in their support of childcare. Frankly, it's one of the few places that we're seeing elected leadership lead on it, and it's kind of an interesting place, right? You wouldn't expect mayors who don't normally do school stuff to be like all about childcare. So, you know, I think it's something we talk about, and we've started to see that growth in cities across the state. I would say, you know, that most childcare groups are, like Palmer said, super organized. So they're a great group of people to work with if you're an elected official. And they hear about a lot of things besides just childcare. So that's one of the other benefits if you're an elected official that is interested in just what your community's thinking. You know, childcare facilities are really, you can find out what's going on. But I also want to just speak to like mostly the women that are listening. And I think that this is really important, an important point, is too often when we're workers as women, we have a tendency to say, well, my home is my home and my work is my work. And we don't share across the line. And I think it's really important at this moment during COVID to start talking about how they are bleeding, because they're bleeding across each other and they're affecting each other, and they should. And it is okay, and it is necessary, really, to talk about this in other places than where you normally talk about it. So I really, if we're serious about equity, if we're serious about women being full participants in the workforce, we need to start talking past places that are just our family about childcare, and really get real about what's going on and sharing with some people that maybe have no idea what you have to go through every day to get to work. And I think that will be really important, because we've got to change culture in this as well. And that's the way we can get true systemic change in childcare.
Great point. Mayor Horgan.
Well, it's tough to wrap up all of that, but I'll say this, you know, this is all the home team and all the strong advocates for all of this. I mean, obviously, I think we need to expand that voice to even be a little bit louder, but you know what, find somebody that doesn't believe, you know, in this data or this, and then have them look into a child's eyes and says, you know what, you're not that important. If they can admit that, you know, to me, that's a lack of a heartbeat, but they won't be able to do it. And find the people who don't believe, and then show them the data and show them the message about how important this is. And I think that has as much of an impact as we will have, I think, over the ensuing weeks to be able to do this too. But thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well said, all of you. Well said. Thank you very much to this panel. Like I mentioned, this will be posted on our website shortly, and please feel free to share it with those folks that may have never thought about childcare before, to your point, Mayor Horgan, and let them, you know, listen to what some of the concerns are, challenges are of childcare. So we hope you'll do that. The last thing I'll mention is that we will be having another webinar in just a couple of weeks with U.S. Senator Rob Portman, just like we did a couple of weeks ago with U.S. Senator Brown. So I hope you will keep an eye out for those details as soon as they become available. And as Palmer said, We all know somebody who will listen to us and will take 15 seconds to send that email out to their member of Congress. Super important today. The decisions are happening in the next week or two. So please, if you can, lend your voice to high quality early learning for our youngest and most vulnerable children. Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your day and look forward to seeing you at our next webinar.